Welcome back to the Brewery project. In the last episode, I gave you an overall look on the brewery and the brewing process, and today we will start to go through the different parts, starting with the boiler. This is the heart of the machine where the magic happens. So let's dive into it. Before any of this equipment existed, we started with something much simpler, a basic 30-liter kettle. It wasn't fancy, but it got the job done. However, it definitely had its limitations. Heating this thing was quite a challenge. It was so large that one hub wasn't enough, so we used all four at once. The kettle didn't fit perfectly, so a lot of energy was wasted in the process. To keep the temperature stable, we wrapped it in blankets. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. We used a malt bag which worked surprisingly well. The bag held all the malts, and at the end of the process we just lifted out, squeezed the liquids back into the kettle, and it was done. The cleaning was very easy. It made things very simple, and we even made some great beer this way. But I quickly realized that the proper brewing setup was needed. That's when I started to investigate, and I was blown away by the amazing systems other brewers had built. I got hooked on the idea of creating something better. When I first began researching how to build home brewery, I realized that there were endless options. I watched tons of videos and saw many different approaches, but I decided to follow the most common method, keeping it simple and cost effective. That brings us to the next step. When I started this project, I knew I wanted to build something practical and cost effective, but also a bit crazy steampunk fun. Then, by sheer luck, I came across these cooking containers at the military surplus shop. They were sturdy, reliable, and incredibly cheap. A perfect starting point for building a boiler. Looking back now, with all the lessons I've learned from this project, there are a few things that I'd do differently. I share those insights at the end of this video for anyone planning to build their own brewery. Here's the initial concept sketch I drew up. At this stage, my plans were pretty simple. Just a basic boiler and below it a mash tun. The idea was to have a straightforward system where I could pour the liquids out using valves. The rest of the functionality you see today came later, evolving from ideas and adjustments we made while testing and using the early versions of the machine. The shape of the whole device was more a rough idea at this point. A lot of final design was influenced by the materials I already had on hand. The wooden parts, for example, were made of leftover pieces, though I have to say these were high quality leftovers, including oak and some dark hardwood. Using what I had available not only saved money but also added a touch of craftsmanship to the build. Here's a look at the boiler with the valve installed to the bottom and the electronic components on top of it, waiting to be installed. This was all new territory for me, so I spent a lot of time figuring out to get the right components, make everything work, and most importantly, ensure it was safe. For safety, I planned features like switches to cut power if something went wrong, and a waterproof enclosure for the heating elements. The boiler required two large holes to accommodate the heating elements, one 1 kilowatt and one 2 kilowatt. This setup would provide a lot of flexibility, letting me use 1 to 3 kilowatts of power depending on the brewing stage. The original setup included a switch that could adjust the power smoothly, which seemed like a great idea at the time. Unfortunately, it broke almost immediately. It was clearly poor quality. I eventually replaced it with two manual switches, which have been much more reliable. I also sourced necessary cables, power socket, a safety socket designed to cut power in case of any issues. These were crucial to ensure the system would be both functional and safe for long-term use. Here's a look at the very first version of the wooden enclosure. At this point, the wooden parts weren't even attached. I was just testing if everything fits together. It was a bit of a puzzle, but seeing it come together like this was a big milestone in the project. As you can see, I'm using two different types of wood here. A lighter wood is oak and the darker pieces are some kind of a dark hardwood. These materials weren't planned from the start, they were just leftovers I already had. But they are high quality leftovers. You can also spot the enclosure for the heating elements on the side of the boiler. This was a critical part of the setup. not just for protecting the electronics but also keeping everything organized and safe. This photo shows the very first test run of the boiler. At this point the wooden enclosure wasn't even finished. We were too eager to wait. Instead, we used the boiler on its own to test its functionality and see how well it worked in practice. Testing it like this was a crucial step, as it not only let us confirm the boiler's basic functionality but also gave us a chance to come up with new ideas for improvements. See it in action for the first time was both exciting and a little nerve-wracking, but it worked well enough to keep us moving forward. I wanted to see from the side already how much liquid is there inside the container, and I knew that there are some kind of glass tubes on the side of some boilers and equipment like this, and I tried to look for it. I didn't know the right word, so I was looking for a window boiler or something, and I ended up seeing windows like this in some big machine. And this gave me the idea that, hey, actually I don't need this kind of tube thing. If I just have a window, I can see inside. So that was the original idea, or the root of the idea. And you see here I ordered the windows, and there was strange damage to them on the edge. There was like this bumps or bruising or whatever, I don't know the right word for it. But even though they were looked a little bit damaged, the windows were fine. So here we have the windows installed on the boiler. One on the left is for the light and the other one is for the viewing inside. This was one of the more unique ideas I tried out, and honestly I bet not many people have lights inside their brewing boilers. The light was meant to make it easier to monitor what is happening inside the boiler. In practice it only works well for lighter beers. For darker brew the light isn't visible at all unless you use very powerful bulb. Still, it was a fun idea to experiment with. The viewing window, on the other hand, has been incredibly useful. Being able to see what's going on inside without peeking from the top saves so much time and effort during brewing. A big shout out goes to my friend who's a professional welder and helped install these windows. The result is fantastic, though the steel frames had these dents from poor transport packing. Thankfully, the damage didn't affect how the windows work. This photo shows the first layer of copper paint I applied to the containers. I've always loved the steampunk style, and many of my projects share this aesthetic. The copper paint instantly transformed the containers into something industrial and artistic, perfectly fitting the look I wanted for this brewery. Now let's take a closer look at the boiler itself. I'm going to walk you through each of the parts and share some of the lessons I've learned along the way. Another thing to fix when I moved the brewery is that leg. I totally forgot that I already broke that once. So as you saw on the pictures, the first thing that I installed was this valve, and it's been pretty okay. Only problem is the connection inside. The part is barely fitting there against the bottom. So other than that, it's been working quite okay. I wanted to have it as low as possible so I can get most of the liquid out when I open it. So that was a little bit tricky. The next part was the box for the heating elements, and so it has two heating elements that are connected together, and oh, they are not connected together. They are separate, and yeah, so I can control this both separately with the switch. It's also grounded to the structure, and so far it seems that it's been working well since there are no any signs of leakage. I did add a hole in the bottom, so if it would start to leak from inside, it would at least empty. And the holes and the sides I hit with some kind of heat resistant silicone or something like that. I can't remember anymore. Then we have the windows. They come off, maybe. Oh, not. They come off in theory. Okay, if I had tools, they would come up. There's a ceiling here, so it won't leak. And this is just for viewing. Actually, it was a perfect height. When I'm brewing, the liquid is usually half the way when we are mashing, so it's easy to follow the circulation. On here, on this side, was the idea of the light. So I have a very strong LED light attached to the outside, and it should shine the light in. But that didn't work as well as I planned. But it's still it was a interesting test at least. But when light beers are brewed, you can see the light, and it helps a little. Maybe I can find some really strong light and use it there in future. So next was just the paint, and this part is not painted since it's not visible to anywhere. So just to add the steampunk look, the green color here, it's also just paint. It's not actually any rust or patina or whatever it's called. And here on the top we have, I guess this is for some kind of pressure valve, but that's not needed since we basically never use it closed. Hatch opens. This opening could be bigger, so that's one minus of it. This opening also has a cap, but I use it when we are circulating the liquids. I put the hose in from here. It's pretty nice. The size, right size to fit it, and I can also put the heat measurement probe or thermistor or whatever it's called. And inside there you can see the heating elements, 1 and 2 kilowatts, and both windows. So what are the lessons learned from this brewery machine? It was cheap and it functions as intended. The windows were cool addition, and yeah, it is powerful enough. But if I would start to do it again from the beginning, maybe I would not add the light window. The front window is fine. They both add a little bit extra trouble cleaning it. But the biggest problem is the heating element. And the thing is that now I have two holes there that are still a risk that they could leak. But also they are really annoying to clean. Like both elements are there inside, they heat up very hot, and yeah, there's stuff sticking to them when it's very very hot, and there's sugars and stuff, so it gets stuck there. It's not that horrible to clean, but if you would have just a simple container with just smooth surfaces, it would be so much easier to clean. And also with the opening, bigger opening, it would be so much easier to clean. What I would do is to get the induction hub and put it underneath. And even like this is not magnetic, so it doesn't work with induction, but you can put steel plates inside it that are magnetic, and that will enable the induction to work. So this cheap induction hubs up to 2.5 or even I guess 3 kilowatts, they go for starting from 30 euros. So they are pretty cheap. And then you could have just a smooth container and cleaning easy. You don't need to have holes in it. Also, the container that would have a bigger opening in the top would prevent it from boiling over, because this, when we are boiling, we have the lid open, but if we use the full 3 kilowatts, it will boil over, and it comes very very quickly. And we have done it several times, and it's a mess when this steamy sugary liquid pours everywhere behind it, and it even goes to the electronics. So yeah, induction, bigger opening in the top. I guess those are the things that I have learned that I would do differently. But as it goes, it does what it was meant to, and it looks pretty cool. So that is my brewery boiler. The boiler is surrounded by insulation, so we lose as little as possible energy, but it does look like a mess. If you have better ideas how to do it, please let me know. I added some ventilation for the heating elements box here. And the light has a hole for it on the side. All the cables and connections are hidden below the insulation. I will go into the details in upcoming videos. So what's next? I don't even know myself, so stay tuned, like, subscribe, and I'll be covering rest of the brewery, home brewery parts. If you have any questions, suggestions, or any comments, please comment. I'm happy to answer you. See you in the next one, and happy brewing!